I remember there was one 70-year-old lady who basically said in Hindi, मेरे को तो इन्होंने खड़ा कर दिया. And she had tears in her eyes.
A large daycare center in a multi-speciality hospital, if it can do 15 chemotherapies per day, here these smaller bespoke centers were able to do 30, 35, 40 chemotherapies per day in a far more efficient manner using better quality tech, better defined processes.
And never cut the corners there. We are probably overstaffed. We are probably doctor-patient ratio is very, very skewed towards it favoring doctor.
Patient care and EBITDA can exist together. That was my biggest learning.
Get a lot of requests from lot of doctors, but by now we all know once we meet a doctor, we interact with the doctor for half an hour. We know whether there is a fit or not, and if there is no fit, we are not afraid to walk away.
And between this entire gap of being very large tertiary care private hospitals to very large tertiary care government hospitals, there was no organized cancer care delivery system.
Hello and welcome to Day 1, where we bring to you conversations with the audacious founders that we've been privileged to partner with. Today, we have three very special guests with us, the founding team behind MOC Cancer Care and Research Center, a company that we've recently partnered with. I am privileged to have here Dr. Vashish Manyar and Dr. Ashish Joshi, the founders, and Manish Jobanputra, the COO. Welcome and thank you for coming over here.
Thank you for having us here, man.
Before we begin, maybe I'll give a quick introduction about MOC, the background, but I'd leave it to you to share a lot of the details. MOC started back in 2018, started out with a few centers in Bombay, but today it has a network of 24 odd community centers across the whole of Western India. 20 of them are profitable. This company has been growing at a very great pace, and at the same time, actually it's been setting benchmarks in customer-centric care in the cancer space in India. Why is cancer care so important for India? I think a lot of people have seen the numbers, but when we looked at the numbers, we were staggered. 1.5 million new cases every year, and that's just half the problem because half the cases don't even get reported. Likely to double over the next 5 years. Indians today are spending $2 billion on chemotherapy, likely to become $4-5 billion in the next 5 years. It's a huge problem. Some people even say it's an epidemic that we've not declared as an epidemic. And I feel in this kind of an environment, a company like MOC is doing God's work. And we are very happy to partner with all of you. So maybe we could begin with the genesis of MOC. What is the origin story? What was the insight that made you start MOC?
So, Mayank, the commonality between the founders, that is me, Dr. Ashish, Dr. Preetham and Dr. Kshitij, is that we were all schooled in the same organization when we were doing our training in oncology, which is the government-funded GCRI based out of Ahmedabad. Now, what we realized when we were students of oncology, even then, was the massive chasm in terms of care gap that existed between the haves and the haves not. So if you had the resources, you would walk into a tertiary care 5-star hospital and get potentially the best-in-class therapy there. If you did not have the resources, you would be okay waiting in hours and hours to get access to larger tertiary care government-funded cancer hospitals, which even then were far and few, and even now are far and few. So largely cancer care was relegated to the state only for creating privileged large tertiary care centers, and an individual had to fend for themselves. And between this entire gap of being very large tertiary care private hospitals to very large tertiary care government hospitals, there was no organized cancer care delivery system. So when we were students, we would often palpate the need to get patients to have access to such. And hence when we passed out, we thought that it would be great if we can co-create something similar in terms of creating a very well-defined cancer care experience without having to make them enter these large, what we dare I say, the apexes of the worlds where you have large white elephants in terms of the quantum of resources that they require to run and the lack of proximity to the patient. So can we now create similar cancer care infrastructure, bring it down to what is essential in terms of delivering it closer to the patient's home and delegating only what requires a very intensive effort, leaving those patients to large cancer care hospitals? And can we now standardize processes by which we can ensure that you cannot have one but multiple such cancer care delivery systems closer to a patient's home? So that was the core genesis of creating a extremely high quality cancer care experience closer to the patient's house.
Got it. No, actually, when we visited some of the centers, non-MOC centers in India, we saw the structural inefficiencies in the system. A tertiary center is not built to care for a cancer patient. It is built to care for the population, but the cancer patient has its own very special needs. And if you look at US, there are MSOs like One Oncology, which have done great work. They've become large businesses while providing specialized care, but nothing existed in India. So I can see where this vision was coming from. But maybe you can talk about the personal choice as well. You were very successful oncologist, long list of patients. It's a risky thing to branch out on your own, leave what is doing really well for you. So what gave you that confidence? Maybe Dr. Joshi, you can answer. What gave you that confidence that let me jump in and do this?
So I think there's probably no one right answer. I think we often talk in business parlance chemistry. I think that's a chemistry which possibly was there between all the four founders. And we had to leave a lot of things. We have to let go a lot of things for a longer goals that we wish to achieve, and we all stuck to it. On a weekend, we discussed MOC. On Monday morning also we discussed MOC. And on Wednesday also we discussed MOC. And that was the differentiator between us and some of the group practices which have traditionally not been that successful, especially in the monospecialty realms. Also alluding to what Ashish very rightly mentioned, we were at a cusp where medical oncology was catapulting into number one in terms of how oncology has been spearheaded as science. If you see last 2 decades, whatever the changes which have happened, almost 80% of the Nobel laureates are in the field of medical oncology. So there was a scientific drift, and the service that we were providing was a reflection of that scientific drift which was happening at the background. And hence, I think any chronic care for that matter, small bespoke units are far better in terms of client experience vis-a-vis the larger hospitals, which probably have all the red tapeism, so one may say so, which can be a barrier to cancer care. So hence, chronic monospecialty medical oncology cancer care together by a unique chemistry with 4 doctors is probably, one would probably succinctly put, what MOC is all about.
Got it. It's coming together of all the forces together. Also, you mentioned it many times that MOC has been profitable from day one. What was the ethos? What kind of company did you want to build when you started out? You must have written out a few bullet points that this is what is the business we want to build. What was that like?
So, Mayank, we were largely obsessed around 2 cornerstones of creating a largely utilizable, friendly business model. And the 2 cornerstones were, 1, a cancer patient's journey, and B, a cancer care giver's journey. We often do not give enough importance to the medical oncologist and the efforts that they put in. So, I mean, that also partly answers the question that why would 48 oncologists who are all in the prime of their lives, where medical oncology itself is often a bottleneck into getting access to cancer care, would want to come and work under one umbrella when you have so many large corporate hospitals probably giving them all that they financially need? Was because for a large multi-speciality hospital, an oncologist is not very important. So for us, we delineated what we thought was very important for us as a company. We thought it was these 2 cornerstones. Can I make the life of a medical oncologist dramatically better? And can I make the life of a cancer patient dramatically better? So hence, if we are a patient, how would I want to be greeted when I walk into a center versus what it is in a large multi-speciality hospital? How should my journey be curtailed in terms of minimal on paper running around, ensuring that my process of cancer diagnosis and cancer therapy is very, very fast and succinct. At the same time, we also wanted to create a process by which we can make a medical oncologist's life significantly simpler. So, we ensure that these centers have a sit-down medical oncologist. Prior to MOC, you would see a medical oncologist, at least in a city like Bombay, catering to 5 different hospitals, spending an hour everywhere, which A, leads to a compromised experience for the patient, and B, the oncologist is also in his journey now moving on to the next hospital and after an hour, and often is shortchanged in terms of ensuring that the previous patient's questions are adequately answered or not. So a medical oncologist now got an infrastructure to sit at one place for 8, 10, 12 hours in a day. We used tech, AI to create largely a paperless experience. We used tech to ensure that the quality of care which is now given to the patient is extremely homogenized, and hence can reduce the quantum of effort that a medical oncologist has to take in terms of ensuring a certain defined level of care. If an oncologist previously was running from A hospital to B giving certain instructions, he would not be sure in terms of what is the quality of these instructions being carried out. Now can I put tech here? Can I add some amount of artificial intelligence in ensuring that there is a homogeneity of care delivery? Can I ensure that if a chemotherapy needs to be administered over 45 minutes, it is indeed administered over 45 minutes and not 30 or 60 minutes? So using these tech, we've ensured that the quality of the experience of the oncologist in terms of delivering care to his patient is dramatically better. So we suddenly realized that if you focus on these 2 cornerstones, the output of what a medical oncologist can give significantly increases. And hence, if this medical oncologist is sitting at my center for 8 hours, the ability for me to create a far better EBITDA out of him is much greater. That's the resource of the finance part of it. Second, for a cancer patient, now if I don't have to walk to the first floor to do some payment, then walk to the 7th floor to do some pharmacy payment, and then walk to the 10th floor of a large multi-speciality hospital to walk into the daycare, having a single window shop where you can sit in your IPD in your room and get all these processes sorted, dramatically improved their quality of experience as an oncology patient. Now when we add these 2, we suddenly create a formula where everybody around you is happy. The cancer caregiver, the cancer caretaker, and the system, because it becomes so much more efficient. A large daycare center in a multi-speciality hospital, if it can do 15 chemotherapies per day, here these smaller bespoke centers were able to do 30, 35, 40 chemotherapies per day in a far more efficient manner using better quality tech, better defined processes. And by doing this, I am A, improving the patient experience, B, improving the quality of life of a medical oncologist and ensuring that his patients are taken care of, and C, making the whole infrastructure far more profitable, without ensuring that these patients do not end up paying a significantly higher premium in spite of these being bespoke services. So it's been a very conscious call that we at MOC have taken to ensure that it's a priority or a prerogative of us as medical oncologists to complete care of these patients. So the ones who can afford receive the same standardized care. The ones who cannot afford, we create enough bandwidth for them in terms of either access to foundation or discounts which can be passed on to these patients to ensure that they get the same quality of care. So it's not uncommon to see a rickshaw driver sitting in A room taking A therapy, and in the next room the CEO of a multinational company sitting in B room taking the same A therapy and ensuring the same standardized quality process, and both being equally happy and taken care of.
Patient care and EBITDA can exist together. That was my biggest learning as we visited all the MOC and HOC centers when we were interacting with you all. And I think what stood out for us was just the kind of moving feedback that the patients gave. Google ratings are 4.9, which is fine, but when you speak to the patients and the caregivers, it was just fabulous to hear those stories. I remember there was one 70-year-old lady who basically said in Hindi, "मेरे को तो इन्होंने खड़ा कर दिया," which is, and she had tears in her eyes. And I was like, okay, now we can see that there is something meaningful happening here. I think one of the things that a lot of single specialty models have struggled with is, while you may be very good in the core centers or flagship centers where the founders are practicing, things don't go as well in the next set of centers. And maybe Manish bhai, you can jump in here and talk a little bit about how does MOC go about ensuring this standardized care delivery the experience in number 1 center and number 20 center is the same. How does MOC do it?
So, if we look at, there are three, I would probably divide it into three buckets, right, to ensure the consistency of care delivery across the patients and across the centers. The first aspect is probably hard part. The easy to do is functional similarity, right? So, if you look at any of MOC centers, there are certain functional similarities to it. Parking availability, individual rooms available, all setups are semi-ICU setups, so all emergencies are taken care of, all licenses are there. So these are hard parts, right? These are basic requirement, and everything is as far as possible on single floor. So patient journey is smooth. So from that perspective, it's the functional part, which is the hard part. The second thing we look at is the people, right? So hiring the people, their training, SOPs, how they will deliver the care. From the perspective of all our centers are NABH accredited center. So we ensure that from hiring, we do give them good training so that the centers become NABH and the staff is comfortable doing that. And the third and most important part is the captain of the ship, which is the oncologist, which is going to manage that center. Probably most management bandwidth goes in ensuring that the right person is onboarded. We get a lot of requests from a lot of doctors, but by now we all know once we meet a doctor, we interact with the doctor for half an hour, we know whether there is a fit or not. And if there is no fit, we are not afraid to walk away and wait for the right candidate to come along. Because that's the most important asset in our daycare center. So these are the three parts which ensures that there is a consistent output across the centers.
Fabulous. And I think there is something in your selection framework which is working clearly. We have 48 medical oncologists, zero churn, zero attrition. This is an industry where people don't have that much of a loyalty. They keep moving from one brand to another. Maybe Dr. Joshi, you can talk about what do we do to, one, select, what's our framework of selecting the right doctor, and then how do we keep them motivated and excited about the MOC vision, our mission statement?
I think selection of a captain is most crucial in terms of what MOC offers to oncology at large. So there are two aspects of it. One is the competence of an oncologist as an oncologist, and secondly, the culture. So there are, as you know, Manish Bhai very rightly mentioned, we've interviewed so many. In just few hours, we probably can make out, is this the right fit? And I think in MOC, we have always given importance to a culture at a very, very high level. I think that is the culture that we pride on. That is the culture we wish to promulgate. That is the culture which we wish to pass on or rub down to the patient. And that's where probably answers one of your question is that why every MOC center is exactly the replica irrespective of the centers which have been run by founders. And also there are conscious efforts which are being done. We run a buddy program wherein there are 48 medical oncologists across now. How do we interact with them? It's impossible for four founders to interact with all of them repeatedly. So we have crafted a beautiful buddy program wherein there's no senior junior. There are people who are in the system before a newcomer has joined. They have been kept as its buddy so that if there is any concern, be it a professional concern or a personal concern, that will be addressed by our team. So the whole culture is just not a professional commitment, it's a family commitment, personal commitment, which is what differentiates MOC from other healthcare networks.
Can I add something to what Ashish Bhai said? I think a part of the solution to the question lies in the question itself. Why do doctors shift hospitals every few years? Inherently, doctors are never so insecure. For example, they spend 5.5 years at the same place where they do their medical oncology training. Have you ever heard of a doctor doing first year in one hospital and then asking for a shift to a second year in another hospital? No. So if they can stick at one place for 5.5 years, why do they need to want to rather change their professional engagement every few years? A, because the environment is often slightly hostile. It's a typical corporate culture which is driven by number more often than not. And B, somewhere the doctor is not felt that he is an important part of the decision-making committee here. Now that's what we try to work upon, that what you would want, and hence coming back to the basic concept of what MOC is about. The two cornerstones of care. can I make a medical oncologist most comfortable here? And when I mean most comfortable, it necessarily does not mean financially most rewarding, but also the environment where I'm allowed to proliferate and give the best possible advice to my patient without any corporate head honko judging my prescription. So this medical oncologist is suddenly not having to worry about what drugs he writes, is there enough CT scans or PET scans, what we hear in the typical corporate lingo. No, he only has to care about what is best for that patient. And that is what we do when we are training. And hence we were so comfortable and we love the organization that we work in that we would want to continue our training there. Can we create a similar structure where you have access to the best possible advice from your seniors? That happens in a medical college. When you're in your first year, you have a second year, third year who's telling you what is right and what is wrong for you. Similarly, we have people in the organization, as Dr. Ashish mentioned, which are buddies, which ensure that they are your 3 a.m. friends. That if you have a professional concern of how to treat this patient, they have access to virtual tumor boards where you have the collective wisdom of people who've been practicing oncology for more than 40 years, who they can access with a click of a phone. At the same time, we're also ensuring that in this journey, they do not have to second guess if there is somebody who's sitting and calculating what you're doing in terms of the economic benefit to the organization. So when you take these clutches away from any doctor, no doctor would want to shift every few years. It's because of the lack of these existing softer aspects of care, which do not exist in large corporate hospitals, that these doctors want to shift every few years. None of them in MOC would want to work anywhere apart from MOC, including us, because this is home and it cannot be a better place to work in.
Fabulous. Playing the long game from day one. I think that was something that stood out to us also when we spoke to all the doctors. I think they felt at home. They felt that this is a place that cares about patients, and unfortunately, the world thinks that doctors are forced to make money or they're only trying to make money. That's not the case. Doctors really do want to do good for their patients, and if they get a place that allows them to do it, that's fabulous.
And then you have zero attrition.
And you have zero attrition. The practice builds, EBITDA follows. I think that's how it works. So we've been we were very, very happy to hear how excited the doctors felt about, let's say, the next 10, 15, 20 years ahead of them at MOC. Manish bhai, one question for you. How do you get these doctors to be doctors, spend time with the patient, but also give you time to discuss with you how the business is doing?
So I think they have answered it in an indirect way a lot of times during their discussion. Their focus is always on doing the right thing, right? So when any message is coming from top and there is consistency in the message, that this is what the organization should do and this is where organization should focus, then there is no dilemma in the whole structure. So the message from all of them is consistent, that this is what the business is about and this is why we have founded this. Stick to these principles. Within that, you take your decisions. And so it becomes easier. We don't have to second guess what will be their decision in this situation. So for most of our team members, decision making is simple because the guiding principles are already there. So we only have to bother them, when some things come beyond those principles and we are, trying to see which one to choose. Over a period of time, all of us in the core team know what will be their selection, and we still go and tell them that okay, this is where we are, and more so often than not, yeah. So we don't have to second guess, and that's where most of the things become easy for everybody. Most organizations spend a lot of time in second guessing what to do, whereas at MOC we don't have to do that, and that's what makes everything efficient. So that's what my take is on that.
And just to add to that, also very importantly, in our journey of MOC, we realized, all of us, that there are certain things which we can't do, we are not good at, and that's why somebody like Manish has given a completely different definition to MOC. I think Manish came when we were probably 5 centers, Manish. So I think that journey from 5-7 centers to 23, I think he owns a lot to it.
And also often, dare I say, as founders, you tend to end up becoming a roadblock because you're so obsessed with everything that you feel that, oh, this has to come through me. And hence division of responsibility in the organization is extremely important. So amongst 4 founders, there is one person, so Kshitij largely looks after the tech part, he looks after the EMR and the quality control. Preetham largely looks after the marketing overview and a bird's eye view of how every marketing effort at MOC should be focused on. Preetham also is integral in ensuring the overall buddy program is taken care of in reaching out and keeping that connect with oncologists. Me and Ashish Bhai largely focus on growth, business development and creating newer geographies. So hence there are no confusion in terms of who's supposed to be thinking about what. And there is no one person who's obsessed with, controlling the entire process. And hence this gives Manish Bhai and his team a lot of flexibility where there is no one person who wants to know everything. At the same time, everybody is extremely responsible for the decisions that they take.
So KR is a very well defined and it's a very corporate governance is very, very compact. So things become easy.
The main aspect is, I think, trust and delegation. So they are very good, all 4 of them, in terms of delegating and trusting that team will take the right decision. They guide, they mentor, but more or less then they know that, okay, team will, take the right decision. Usually, so all 4 of them have enough trust in 4 of them because they are co-founders, but also they have immense trust in the ability of the team to deliver. So.
And maybe that brings us to the part about looking ahead for the organization. We've done fabulously well to get to where we are. What lies ahead for MOC? What is the ambition? Where do we want this company to go?
No, so I think conceptually we wish to remain a monospecialty. I think that's a very conscious call that we've taken. And we wish to remain in a distributed healthcare networks. So natural extension of this thought process would be to reach to more geographies which are conducive to our kind of practice. And so that's the immediate next goal is probably conquer some of other geographical territories of India and even abroad with a similar distributed healthcare network model. Also, Mayank, we are here in a process of building an institute. It's just not about creating centers and delivering chemotherapies. It's about creating an oncology experience for a patients at large and for the oncologists also at large. So we are looking at a lot of knowledge sharing, education building, advocacy, clinical trial, molecular oncology and precision oncology and research. They have been an integral part of MOC rights from its inception, and we will obviously continue to boost them and take this to the next level. So yes, going to different places, but making a core strong and creating an oncologist institute of a repute is possibly the larger goal that we wish to achieve.
Fabulous. Do you think an IPO is what you want to do about this company?
So the late.
Yeah. See, I think valuation, EBITDAs, IPOs are the bystander effects. I think the focus will always remain on Monday morning and on weekends is that how do we enhance our patient's experience and how do we make our institute strong. Rest is a fallout.
So in fact, Mayank, interestingly, we are so obsessed with patient experience and patient outcomes that EBITDAs have never been a part of the board meeting discussion. Somehow, what we've realized is that when you want to achieve a greater and a better goal, the finances always take care of it. So the reason we've always been EBITDA positive is because we've never looked at EBITDA as a primary source of value creation. So yes, finances are so important to ensure that a certain level of care is being given to these most patients. But we run MOC the way you would run your house. And how often you've seen people running their house run out of money? Never, right? Because you're frugal in terms of defining what is essential, at the same time what is extremely functional. So while we are at 24 centers, historically we could have been at 80, 90, 100 in the first 5 years of our journey. We could have burnt money, as then 4 years back was the norm when you raise capital. This is our second round of capital. After the first round of capital, we could have burned money, put in 40 more centers. That's not how we run our lives. And why would we live two different lives, right? Let's live our life the way we would take care of our house. So every aspect of care in terms of delivery, in terms of resources is not just frugal, but it's what is extremely essential. At the same time defined by a qualitative need to ensure that it is eventually reaching the end user here, which is the cancer patient. And if you can take good care of your cancer patients, if you can ensure that your oncologists are happy, you'll always remain EBITDA positive.
Fabulous.
I mean, never cut the corners there. Never ever. We are probably overstaffed. We are probably doctor-patient ratio is very, very skewed towards it favoring doctor, and paramedic and patient ratio. I think all these aspects do matter when it comes to an individual patient experience, and I think it's very critical in creating a brand recognition for him.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with all of us. Hopefully this will inspire more doctors to become founders and build institutions like MOC. Thank you.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Thank you.